Hello and welcome to this latest episode of the Blue Lights of Mine podcast. We're here at the Emergency Services Show Day 2 and we're delighted to be joined by Ellie Snape, who's a student paramedic. We'll get her to introduce herself in just a moment. Today we're going to have a little talk about the experience of students in their mental health education, in their own mental well-being, and just try and dig into that in a little more depth and see what we can learn as clinicians as to how we can best support them through that journey. So hi Ellie, do you want to give us a little introduction about who you are, your experience today, what you're doing right now, and just tell us about you.
Hello, so I have just started my paramedic science journey. I originally come from the Lake District, so coming down here is very overwhelming with all the flashing lights. But I'm really interested in how we can actually further the training and how to keep passion in the practice. So this is great to talk to you today.
Great. Well, it's so good to have you on, and so grateful to you for coming and talking to us. So you've obviously said you just started your journey. Tell us where you are, what you've done so far, what your experiences have been, and how you're enjoying that journey into paramedic science.
Yes. So the trust that I originally started out with in the north of England is a relatively quiet service, and I've recently moved down to the West Midlands area. I've been on 2 placements here and the change is pretty drastic. There's lots to think about, there's lots of calls to go to. So the learning curve has been pretty great. I've also had the opportunity to work up in Scotland, and again the calls that we're going to there are completely different. So I think it's great that I'm able to actually pull my knowledge from lots of different services and lots of different trusts, and that's shaped my journey so far in my learning.
Great. And what experience had you had prior to starting that journey? Had you been involved in sort of medical care in any function or way before?
Yes, so I actually originally went to ballet school as a performing arts student.
So a bit of a change in
just a little
direction.
bit. Well, is it a little bit?
Wow.
I'm not sure. And I decided that wasn't right for me. I'm quite an active person and I wanted to be out in the world experiencing things. So I moved up to Scotland and I joined the SAS Wildcats, which is basically like the CFR equivalent in Scotland. And funnily enough, I didn't actually get called out many times with them, but I did. The skills that I learned was brilliant because I was able to notice things in my community that I was more confident to go to. So I was driving down the motorway and saw someone in trouble. I was more confident with the skills that I had to be able to help them as well. So I don't think it's necessarily the things you get called to, it's actually just in life. And those experiences have put me in a really great place to start the course and start learning because I have the foundations already. And my interest in medicine sort of went beyond that and I started teaching. So I got my qualifications in teaching first aid and basically like the lower levels of trauma courses, which I found really interesting. 1, because I love teaching and talking, but 2, because it made me realise how much I didn't know. And so this course is basically to carry on that learning, not necessarily where I'm going to end up, but actually I'm interested in the profession in itself.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of a journey that so many of us go on, isn't it, in terms of understanding, what we do know, what we don't know, and actually realising the more we know, the less we actually know. So, I think we've got to reflect on the fact that this is realistically a lifelong learning journey. We're never going to know it all. We're always going to want to improve our practice for the benefit of our patients, and that's what we're here to do.
Of course.
So, obviously that transition from, where you were, what you've done, into student paramedic life, into placements, into these kind of things, how have you found that? How's it been for you?
It's been great. I enjoy learning, so I think going through the university pathway is the right decision for me. But also I do understand that the tech to para route is great for the practical learners. I do think that the route that I'm going on, I know the skills, and so that's not the issue, but learning protocol that comes behind it, learning the guidelines. There's so much more than just treating a patient. There's the what comes before, the what comes after, and why am I doing it? And I think that is the biggest learning curve at the moment, how to deal with life actually doing the job rather than just going to a couple of call outs every now and again.
Okay. So tell us then a little bit more about your placement experience. Obviously, being thrust into the world of blue lights and sirens as they go off behind us in the show. It's a big thing to do, and there's a lot of exposure to some really quite difficult situations, scenarios, and things that as a ordinary human being we wouldn't expect to see and experience. So how have you found that?
Yes, so I think if I talk about this from a general perspective of my class, we're quite open and honest in our class, and we do talk a lot about how placement has affected us. The nerves before you start your first placement cannot be replicated anywhere, because you just don't know how you're going to react in these situations. We also spoke quite a lot about going to our first cardiac arrest, because there is so much build-up and so much emphasis, so much training before you actually go and see that for real life. You're not sure how you're going to react. You know what you need to do, and then it's the aftermath as well. What do you do after you've been to that traumatic event? And it's really interesting as a class how we've actually supported each other through that. And some of the students that have maybe already been to a cardiac arrest before placement were able to explain what it's like, what you're actually going to see, how people are going to react around you. And I think that was really interesting from a critical thinking perspective. Actually, can we start thinking about the realities of it before we actually experience it? So yeah, placement's been great. Placement's interesting. There's lots and lots of learning, and I think the paramedics have definitely supported us in our learning, and there's not been you're a student and you're a paramedic. There's not been that difference. We're all colleagues, and they do refer to us as colleagues. So it's been great to witness the highs and the lows with them. Lots of learning.
I mean, that's really great to hear, and I think we should reflect really that some of these challenges are significant. There are a lot of as you say, ups and downs, highs and lows in all of this. And I guess, from our perspective, we want to sort of better understand a little bit about how you experience those lows, and, what you do and what we can do for you guys as a student, as students, to support you in that. So tell us a little bit more about what that looks like for you and for those that you are learning with.
Yes, so I've spoken recently, and I laugh because it's such an unnatural thing, isn't it? And it's not something people talk about a lot, but we broke it down and we said, well, what do you do after you've been to a traumatic event? And most of them said, I'm absolutely fine on shift, I'm fine with the paramedics, I keep my crying for the way home. So they'll get in their cars and they'll cry on the way home, which is pretty sad. Personally, I almost bottle it up a little bit, and I don't really talk about it. And because it is the norm in the ambulance service, we're all expecting to see these things. Maybe there's a unspoken rule that we don't talk about it. I definitely think in the coming years, people are opening up about it a lot more. And even down to the student level, we're openly talking about it. And nearly at the first day, we just said, hey, we're going to go through a lot of things together, and we're going to go through 3 years and see, we don't know. That's the whole point. So let's break the boundaries now, and let's start talking about it so that when we are in trouble, we can. And I think that's the perspective that our lecturers have also taken away as well. They've looked at our class and seen how open and honest we are, and they've matched us.
Yeah.
And the lecturers have got a really interesting job teaching us, because teaching isn't a personal thing. Teaching is a textbook, okay? But the way that they've brought it in now is that teaching is personal, and this job is personal, and so they've started talking about their experiences, or they've started talking about people's experiences that they've heard of, and they have got to our level, and they've been able to talk about, well, I went to this call and I cried for 2 days after. When I went to my first cardiac arrest, I was absolutely fine. I was almost a little bit, it's done now, I've been to my first cardiac arrest, it's all over, it's not going to get any worse. The next day, I was distraught, and I couldn't get my head around what had happened. And that's the thing that I think students really need to understand, that people are going to deal with it completely differently, and the lecturers do understand that. And in my journey in training at the moment, they've gone into the helpful ways of dealing with the emotions that we're going to be dealing with. So yeah, I think it's been really interesting, and I think it's great that I've got such a supportive team. and such a supportive classroom environment. So we're able to talk about these conversations openly.
Great, and that's really reassuring to hear, but I think there's sort of bits in that little description you give me that sort of almost make me ask, is there more we can do? So, particularly around that discussion of, take it into the car, taking it away from the placement environment particularly. So I guess there's kind of two questions for me that come out of that. So one is, do you think that there is that sense of A, fear of failure, but sort of B, fear of being told you're not good enough, that you haven't got the right emotional resilience to actually complete your placement or your course in that placement environment? Is that something we're potentially inadvertently, shall we say, imposing upon you guys as students, that we can perhaps reflect on and think about how can we better create that open, reflective, honest and emotionally intelligent space to support you?
Yeah, I don't think the atmosphere, let's say in the crew room, is one where you can't go and talk to someone. You can. I think it's more of a personal boundary, that we are at the end of the day in a professional environment, and the boundaries between professional and personal are very, very mixed in an environment, an ambulant environment. So I wouldn't say that the service doesn't help us. I wouldn't say that anything's coming back and telling us, hey, you can't talk about your emotions. But it's whether or not people act on that. And I have been one to go to a call and be struggling at home, and I've just texted a paramedic and said, hey, can we just talk it through? They've got such a clinical mindset that they can go, well, this is why that happened and this is why this didn't.
Yeah.
So I think that's great, and I think we are supported. There's lots of charities that we can reach out to. There's lots of support at the hubs that we can reach out to. And everyone's always got that ear, but it's the first step of being confident enough to talk. And I think the more that we talk, the more people will feel confident about it. And the training that can be provided at universities, at the Tech to Para route, that's the start of it, because it shouldn't be a taboo topic. We are going to mental health patients and expecting them to be honest. Why can't we champion what we're trying to get people to do?
I think that's such an important point. And actually for me, I hear what you're saying about that personal confidence, about the ability to sort of open up to people. But I think actually there's a real, imperative on us as clinicians to model that as well, to show you guys what that looks like, how we can communicate emotion in the context of, when things go wrong, whether it be the big, gory, horrible job, or whether it be the sort of simple elderly faller that, wouldn't necessarily affect anyone, but it has just triggered something in me or you or someone else as an individual because of personal experience. And I think the point is we bring all of these different personal experiences and circumstances and backgrounds into the job with us, and we've got to be sensitive to that and understand that things are going to affect different people in different ways as well.
Yeah, I know personally I'm not affected by the trauma. I'm not affected by the so-called big jobs. I'm actually affected by going into a care home and someone's feeling really unwell and they're on their own, or their family's hours away, and that makes me angry. Or if I see people that are not looking after their loved ones like I would look after mine, they're the jobs that really, really upset me. And they're the jobs that actually the paramedics go, hey, I felt that too. And they can see that when I get back into the ambulance, I'm angry with the situation, I'm angry with the system, and there's not a lot that I can do about it apart from support the patient. But the paramedics do step in and they do actively support me, and I think that's something really important and really, really lovely, that actually they do understand, because they've had their own personal circumstances and they know what makes them angry and sad and happy. And so actually, if you make a connection with paramedics that you're working with, they can tell when you're not happy, and they do step in. And I've been surprised at the amount of, hey, no, don't just brush it under the rug, let's talk about this, let's sit in the back and let's decompress from the situation that we've just been in. And it doesn't matter if it's a trauma, and it doesn't matter if it's a cut finger. Everything affects people differently, and I think that's a really, really important point to make.
I mean, it's really great to hear you speak so positively of that experience and how you are being supported in that placement environment. What I'd like to do is just sort of transition from that wellbeing perspective more over to sort of the patient care. Blue Lights and Minds is very much more focused on the delivery of care to patients. And I'm just really intrigued as to, you're coming to the point where you're nearly finishing your first year. moving into second year. What has been your experience of mental health education and supporting mental health patients in placement and practice?
Yeah, so currently in my journey, we've not touched on mental health specifically, but we have touched a lot on communication.
Yeah.
And we've talked about different communication models and how we match people at their level, or if we do indeed match people at their level, all about how to talk, what humans do. So currently there is not a lot of training on that, and I do expect it to ramp up a bit in the coming years. But what I've learned is from the paramedics on the road, and I think that is the most important point to make. Above all, the way that I treat a mental health patient is from my own experience, and I had a really, it's obviously not lovely, but I had a really, really lovely and moment that I'll think about for a very long time with a patient where actually my own trauma and my own mental health was that I didn't feel emotions, and I wasn't sad and I wasn't angry and I wasn't happy. I was just acting that because I knew in my head that's what you do in these circumstances. So we went to this lady and she just didn't feel anything. And I think it was important to note that some of the paramedics, because of the protocols that are put in place, well, we need to see what this person's feeling and then we need to put them in the appropriate place. Sometimes that doesn't work and sometimes we do need to adapt, and that can't be taught. And I said, guys, can I just chat with her for a moment? And they said, yeah, of course you can. So all a learning experience at the end of the day. And I said, hey, what are you feeling? And she said, oh, well, I'm not sure. I said, it's okay to say nothing. And she said, okay, well, that's exactly what I'm feeling. I'm not feeling anything. And the situation that I've put myself in is to feel something. She was confused about not feeling things, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And so that patient and I made a really, really good connection. And I actually stayed with her at the hospital for a while doctors came in and had a look at her and checked that she was okay, because I'd managed to put the protocols aside and I'd managed to think, what am I doing in this situation? If I'm that person, how do I want to be treated? Do I want to be labelled happy, sad, angry? Or do I just want to be treated and talked to and listened to, So that's really important. And I think that is definitely a thing that we can't train, but it is a thing that we can put people in the position to decide what they're going to do. And things like AI and labs and speaking to people that can tell their story is really, really interesting. It's like I say, how can you give someone advice if you've not been in that position before? It's a situation like that, I think, where everybody has been through something, and so being able to harness that and empower yourself with that is the best training you can have, supported by all of the facilities that we do have to expose ourselves to that. Sometimes the biggest problem is knowing what to say and when.
Yeah, and I think, you're absolutely right. It's really important to bring that experience. I think, as you probably learn more, it's sort of how do we make sure we meter some of that experience? How do we make sure we're not giving too much of ourselves? How do we, make sure that we're protecting the patient from that and not colouring sometimes what and how we approach patients? Just obviously coming to the end of the first year, saying you've not really had any formal mental health training input, did that kind of align to your expectations of what training would look like and your experience in practice of how regularly perhaps you might see mental health patients?
Personally, I was a little bit disappointed because I feel like in this day and age we are talking about medical trauma and mental trauma, and they're different things and they shouldn't be. All my questioning lessons so far have been on where does it hurt, what happened, and it's not about how do you feel and what can we do to help you. And so I do think that there needs to be a really, really big shift in what people deem important. And I think the mental health things, we're going to a lot of mental health cases, a lot. And why isn't there training right at the start of our course, just the same as CPR? Why aren't we learning how to help someone in an emergency and in a mental emergency? So I think definitely there should be more emphasis put on that and how we talk to mental health patients. And I have spoken to a couple of my colleagues up and down the country, and I think that is reciprocated in the tech to para route as well, that they've said that now they've been through it, that there wasn't any formal mental health training that they felt they had, and that the only way that they do approach patients is from what they've learned from placements and what they've learned from their own trauma. So lots more training in it and lots more talk about it is really, really important, because
I think
you want to feel able to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for me, coming from the position I come from, my passion, my desire is to see that actually we do start to think about the theoretical side of mental illness, of what that should look like, how we should be approaching, what kind of assessment approaches we should be taking, how we should be thinking about managing risk. Because all of these things need to be contextualized through experiential learning, through that, one-on-one patient relationship, through, creating therapeutic relationship with the patient and building rapport, building trust. But actually, if we rely solely on that relational discussion, or just copying what we've seen mentors do without really and truly understanding the why of that, I think for me it feels like there's risk in that, and it would make me feel very vulnerable. So how does that feel for you, when you are trying to manage a patient? Do you feel like you have that underpinning knowledge, you have the context, or is that still lacking at the moment for you?
I think it's definitely still lacking. Every time I go to a mental health patient, it's what should I say? How do I approach this? And because we haven't had any formal training in it, we're basically just going in and seeing what works best. And that's not the way we should be dealing with it. If someone's in a cardiac arrest, I know exactly what I'm going to do, and I can recall the protocol off by heart. Whereas mental health, yes, it's completely different, and everybody deals with it completely differently. But I would have loved to have known what to do. And these are the people that things that you say can actively improve them, can actively get them to engage with you, and can actively make the situation better. So feeling a little bit not sure if I want to involve myself into this, and stepping back and letting the paramedics and technicians take over is where I'm standing. But sometimes, let's say I'm on a two-man crew, so there's a male paramedic, a male technician, and I'm talking to a female patient who specifically just wants to speak to me. How do I get onto their level? Because I want to talk to you, and I would talk to you if I didn't have the uniform on. But now that I've got the uniform on and I'm thinking about the risk, and I'm thinking about protocols, and I'm thinking about those professional boundaries, where do I judge this, and who's going to tell me what I'm going to do? Because obviously we can't tell what we're going to go to, but we know that when we go on placement, we are going to go to a mental health patient. And so the training beforehand would have been great, and not just knowing how to speak to an unconscious patient.
Yeah, and I think for me, there's very much that element of, that preparedness to go into practice, that realistic expectation of what you're going to see and how you're going to manage that, and also it's just it's almost certain really that you are going to see a patient who presents with mental health needs in that space because of the prevalence, because of the incidence of those presentations within what we do as an ambulance service. So. Yeah, for me, I'm disappointed, I guess, in a sense that you're not having that training at, at least at a basic level, because, we know learning is an iterative process. We know that, you're not going to be able to be taught everything on day one, but it's about how can we introduce the basics across a really wide, diverse spectrum to enable you to start somewhere and build that knowledge piece by piece, through year one, into year two, into year three, and into professional practice beyond registration. Because, I'm learning today, and I will continue to learn tomorrow, as we all should and all will do, I'm sure. I think what I'm really interested to know as well on the back of that is, to what degree do you feel that your mentors, the paramedics, the technicians, have themselves the right level of knowledge and understanding of that mental health education and then the underpinning that leads to their management, their assessment, and ultimately their teaching and guiding of you as a student?
So this is an interesting one. I think the most you can learn is the crews that you're placed with. What is their reaction when they get that call through that says mental health? Are they going to sigh and go, another mental health? Or are they going to go, okay, let's get there as quick as we can and let's help this person? So it's all from that first outlook. That's when you start treating the patient, when you get that call through, when you start thinking about what you're going to do to help. And it is definitely harder with a mental health patient because you're not sure exactly where you're going to start until you meet them. I also really think it's important to say it is all about connection with mental health. And I think I've definitely been to patients where somebody else has connected with them much better than a paramedic. So the technician has talked to them because they can get on their level, and for some reason, we don't know, they've connected with that person more. And I think that's really, really important to know where you stand in these situations. So I've learned about the importance of stepping back. I've also learned the importance of having things to say. So you don't have to go in clinically, when did your feelings start? What do you think you're going to do? Etc., etc. Actually just talking. I went to a really, really interesting case where we just talked about teddies. Absolutely no idea why. And in fact, on the transfer to the hospital, we listened to hula hula music. There is no evidence there to say that hula hula music does magic. But it was brilliant because that really stuck with me. That was really interesting that the paramedics were thinking about things that weren't technically clinical. We're not just going to chuck a BP cuff on you and hope for the best. Actually, we're thinking about things that are going to actively help you. And it's not just talking, it's different things as well. And people were able to use communication cards. So there's all of these resources out there for us to use, but I don't think there's a lot of guidance on what to use when. And that is the difficulty of a mental health call, that not a lot of people are sure what to do. So I think the best thing that I have learned from them is that connection first, and how you deal with the person that you've met, and you're learning things about them and how do you support them best. In the terms of do they feel trained, the general consensus when I ask them is no. They have training, they've had training, but the exposure is the thing that's helped them.
Yeah.
When I further press, they do reveal that actually it is their own trauma that has helped them more than the exposure as well, because again, everybody is different. So I think it's putting yourself in their place and trying to understand what they're going through. But at the end of the day, it's blind leading the blind. But their perspective is really, really interesting, and it's great to learn new techniques to be able to speak to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we kind of inherently know this. I certainly see this when I talk with crews on the road. Certainly it's my own experience as well as I joined the ambulance service, that, the education and support in how we treat and manage and assess mental health patients has historically just kind of not been where we would want it to have been, particularly now we look back. And, there's probably all sorts of reasons for that in terms of the traditional paradigm of what the ambulance service was 30 years ago and how that's changed and developed. And I guess, there is an increasing expectation, not only that there is a degree of parity in how we treat mental and physical illness, but that actually that should be part of an emergency response within an ambulance service, and structures and systems. And, the political will is that, we ultimately are expected to do that day in, day out. So I guess, you referenced the sighing paramedic or sighing crew member, where perhaps there is still that element of stigma, or it's not our job. Well, the truth is it is. Not only is it part of our job, it's part of our expectations as registrants, and it's part of, even if we believe it's not our job, but that's what we're doing day in, day out, we have a responsibility as clinicians to make sure we're competent in the things that we're doing. So if we're going into a situation where we're truly not competent, then, or we recognise that we're not competent, we need to be addressing that. And for me, my part and the team I lead, part in that is to try and improve that situation. So, whilst I don't want to hear that that's the case, obviously it's a uncomfortable reality that we live with. And given that, I just want to encourage people who recognise that in their own practice to engage with us, to come and find us, to drop me an email, to drop the team an email and ask. We want to learn more, to engage with any of the CPD offerings that we put on around our patch, and ultimately try and do their best day by day, more and more for patients. So just as we start to think about, winding this up and bring it to a close, I just want to kind of touch a little bit on your experiences so far and just, I don't know, get you to kind of sum up a little bit of your experience. So what do you think over that first year has been the biggest thing you've learnt about yourself as you've gone through year one paramedic science?
That I am capable of doing the job. I think it's been a real confidence boost. Sometimes when I'm with a crew, I'm too scared to step forward and say, hey guys, I'll take this one and you guys watch and learn. So I've definitely learned to be more confident in the things that I'm thinking and the diagnosis that I'm giving and the treatment that I'm giving the patient. And the paramedics back that up and they say, hey, you're doing great. Like, you're definitely able to do it. And I think that's really instilled a more fireful passion in me to keep on going. And I do think that the course is difficult and it does have, again, it's ups and downs, and some things are more interesting than others. But I think as long as I'm keeping the passion and I keep coming to events like this and I keep on learning, that's the most important thing, that actually I'll be okay and I will get through the 3 years. And I do think that university has been great for addressing actually how we personally deal with the things that we're going to see. And I think there has been an emphasis on that, which I must point out. And the lecturers have been very careful to tell us how they deal with things, because they've been on the service for years and they know what works for them.
Yeah.
But we've also talked about the healthy habits, okay? So exercising, eating healthy. And we've spoke about the foundations that then lead to you being a good clinician. So that's been great to just learn about how to go to work, how to be a human. It's been really great to go back to the basics and actually learn how to speak to someone and think, not just do, think more clinically and think more in depth in things, which is great.
Great. And I think, the learning lesson in that for us as clinicians and mentors is the importance of nurturing confidence, is the importance of giving people opportunity to grow in confidence, the ability to engage in that learning journey. Because actually, if we put people down, if we hide students in a corner and expect them to be seen and not heard, then ultimately there's no learning going on. Well, no, that's not quite true. There is learning going on, don't get me wrong, but it's not to its maximum potential. We need to make sure that we're fostering that confidence, because we know that in a short period of time, you guys are going to be out autonomously treating, managing, and seeing patients. So I think that's really important to me. And we want to obviously balance that. We don't want to ever foster this sense of I know everything in a student, because we don't either. So actually that's really important as well, and it's about balancing that. What do you think your biggest hopes and aspirations are for the rest of the course? What would you like to see happen over the next two years or so as you go through the rest of your course?
Well, as you can probably tell, I'm a little bit of an outgoing one. So I would love to see the passion brought back into teaching and the passion brought back into the practice, like I said. I would love for there to be conferences that students put on where we can all gather and we can all talk about how we've experienced the course and what we can do to further develop it, because just like the practice, we still need to develop the way that we're teaching. And I think the lecturers are great, and there's lots of different teaching methods in my university, which I love. But why aren't we putting on simulation days? Why aren't we doing, there used to be competitions on treating patients, and people were going to Cyprus and working with mountain rescue. There was loads of things going on, and I feel like it's quieted off a little bit. So getting people more involved and getting people passionate, it's not just about turning up and doing the course and passing the tests, because at the end of the day, you are going to be treating the patient that you're learning about in the book. So yeah, I'd love some more events. I'd love to just go and play around and be passionate and have fun and instill the HCP guidelines,
Yeah.
And be a well-rounded clinician.
Great. Now that's really important. So And just, I guess, to reflect back at you, actually, it's not just the passion in the teaching, it's the passion in the learning.
Yeah.
But what I really hear from you is that desire to see both in yourself and in your colleagues, a real ownership of that learning journey, whether it be influencing, say, the teaching methods and how that's delivered, or indeed in how you commit yourself to that learning. Ellie, it's been great to have you join us today. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Obviously, I'm aware that you're doing some work to support and sort of publish a little bit of information, I guess, about how your journey through this period is going. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that just as we end, and then we'll sign off?
Okay, so I have actually just started a podcast called The Crew Room, and it's based on being accessible for the community, the public, and also healthcare professionals to have a listen in and be able to relate to. We talk about the first time that we've been to a cardiac arrest and what to expect, but we also talk about the career pathways and the fact that you can actually go into lots and lots of different specialists. So it's an interesting take, and I was listening to podcasts and they were so clinical, and I thought, I can't listen to this as a first year person, I can't listen, but I want to do something to carry on learning when I'm at home. So this way it's a little bit of a learning diary. We get to learn the highs and lows, and we talk to students and we talk to professionals about their experience, what they would do, basically crew room gossip.
Great. Where can people find that if they want to look it up?
So the Crew Room is on Spotify and YouTube.
Ellie, thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you again for another episode of Blue Lots of Minds.
Thank you so much.